Welcome to Beyond Transcendence with Andrew. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. On today's show, I have Amrit Singh. Amrit Singh has been studying Kundalini yoga for over 30 years, which gives him the ability to deeply understand and connect with his clients. In 1999, Amrit decided to move to India to deepen his exploration of yoga and meditation. After 20 years in India, he recently moved into Mexico. During these years, his true passion has been always helping people through one-on-one coaching with a special focus on supporting people to create the freedom they need while doing what they love. Welcome to the show, Amrit. Welcome, Amrit.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So what brought you to spirituality?
Oh, wow. What brought me to spirituality? It's an interesting question because since I was really little, I felt really connected with spirituality. When I was 6, 7, 8, I was always connected to the animals and to nature. And I was very sensitive and had this big open heart. Unfortunately, growing up in the 80s, with role models like Rambo and James Bond on TV, that was not really the path you were taking as a young, strong man. So I figured that out around 12, 13 when puberty hit, and I became this cool guy. I had the black leather jacket, I was smoking, I was drinking, I was like getting in people's face when they got, I played a real good game. And so for many years, I just, acted that fake masculinity, like, you want anything, or I punch you in the face kind of attitude.
Right.
And so that was really interesting because I lost all that connection to my sensitivity, to my heart, to my feelings, to my joy, to my life as a whole, as a human being. And I became this weird hollow shell of a fake teenager, which, didn't work in school, got in trouble left and right. And, always something happened. And then with 16, I found weed. And so that was really interesting because I started smoking weed and that sensitivity started coming back. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so confused. Where am I putting the cool guy now here? Because I'm all open and I'm all sensitive. And so I was like, I figured it out. I'm now just have to smoke weed all day long for the rest of my life. And I got this figured out. So I did that for a while. And if you ever smoked weed for an extended period of time, what happens is, even though it does help you open up and help you connect to your sensitivity, you slow down, and you slow down quickly. And it's a little bit like, when you're, as a comparison, when you're walking towards the top of the mountain, and you're exploring your spirituality and you're really reconnecting with it. And then you find weed along the way, and it's a little bit like making camp and just sitting at the side of the path and just smoking for a year, 5, 10, 20, it doesn't really matter, right? But you're having a great time, just getting high, eating your chips, watching TV, eating lots of candy, not taking anything so serious, and really connecting with that feminine side of our being. And so when I realized that, I think it was about 5, 10 years into it, 7, I think, where I was like, oh my God, I just smoked weed for the last 7 years. Nothing happened. I'm really connected with my femininity and with my soft side and with my spirituality in that way. But freaking nothing happened, right? Looking back a year, nothing was different. Everything was the same. Nothing had changed. My situation hadn't changed. I was like, okay, no, this doesn't work for me anymore. So I stopped and I moved to India. And I got into Kundalini yoga and I started meditating, and I went really deep into this whole practice, with hours and hours a day of meditation. There in India, I adopted the Sikh religion, and I grew a beard, and I put on a turban to cover my long hair. And then that was the starting point, right? And so I think that answers your question of how I got into spirituality. I can keep talking about how it went from there, but that was kind of the beginning.
That sounds wonderful. What was it like being in India?
It's rough to be in India. India is is a harsh environment. It's a tough country to be in. It challenges you on every level. I hated it for 20 years. It was it's not like moving to Bali, and sitting by the beach and be, my God, I love Bali. How moving to India is super challenging. But like we all know, when we challenge ourselves and we step out of our comfort zones, we start to grow. And so I grew a lot in India, but it's certainly not a country I would just say, oh, let's go back for a holiday. It's so beautiful in India. No, it's not. But you grow a lot. And it's like probably, in my opinion, one of the most spiritual countries in the world. Like for us humans, we always created spaces of spiritual connection, right? That was tens of thousands of years ago. That was nature, and then it became stone circles, and then became cathedrals and temples, and just a place where you could go and you're like, I feel so much more connected to something bigger and to some spirit, right? And India is like that in the entire country. You just land there and get out in 40 degrees Celsius at 10 o'clock at night, which is like 110 American, right? So it's like really, really hot and bothersome, and you sweat and you're like, oh my God, this horrible, and smells, and it's like a million people everywhere. And you're like, but I could just sit down here on the side of the road and meditate, and would be really easy. So that's cool about India.
That's nice. What did you find when you were meditating?
Oh my God. We're going to probably talk on that for 3 hours. So let me see if I can find you a quick answer to what did I find when I was meditating. I think I found myself again. I found that child version of myself, which I knew from when I was 6, 7, 8, like that softness, that sensitivity, that feeling, that unconditional love, that opening my heart to people I cared for, not having to fake anything, that authentic version of myself. And I was like, oh my God, I want more of that. Like this feels so much better than being this fake person walking around being like, oh, I am so cool and look at me, I'm so special, right? So I found like that. It's very interesting because I use the word special. It's like I found that specialness inside of me, which we all have, right? We all are special in our own aspect, in our own identity, in our authentic self. And that's really what I found meditation allowed me to learn, and is still allowing me to learn after 30 years of practice, is to reconnect just a little bit more with my authentic self and who I really am, rather than what my mind and my ego think I should be and how I should be showing up.
It sounds beautiful. So how does a person raise their energy without stimulants?
Ooh, great question. So let's start with first, like, how do you raise your energy with stimulants, right? With plant medicine, with ayahuasca, with mushrooms, with weed, with all those things, which, I actually, for 23 years, I didn't touch any of that stuff while I was in India. And then I came back, and here in Mexico, it's it's a little bit more open, and plant medicine's a big thing. So I was like, okay, let me dabble a little bit and explore a little. And so I got some really interesting answers, because what happened to me is, the medicine, like how people like to call it, really, right? It's the drugs, right? But what the drugs or the medicine did for me, it shot me really high. It shot me into these realms where I was like, whoa, this is crazy to be up here. It's crazy to have this experience. But it's non-sustainable because I didn't create it by myself. And so when the drug was wearing off, I dropped back down to where I was before, maybe even a little bit lower, and I was a little bummed. And I was like, oh my God, now I'm here again. What do I have to take it again? Right? It's nice to have that experience of being super high, but it's hard to sustain it. So I would recommend plant medicine, let's say, to people who have never experienced that kind of high vibration. Right. And they're like, hey, does this even work? Is this even something my human body can do? Yeah, take some ayahuasca and you know what your human body can do. It's freaking amazing. But again, you get an experience, you get a glimpse, and then you're not there. You just had this short-term experience. So now come back to your question, how does one raise their own frequency so that you can create this by yourself? You start with your physical body. You start with the way you eat. You start with the way you exercise. You start with the way you rest and recover, how much you sleep, how you take care of yourself, how much stress you're experiencing throughout the day. That's the foundation. Because if your physical body is not in the right place, you're not going to make it anywhere. Because your physical body directly affects your mental state, right? It affects the ability of having a clear thought, staying focused, staying determined, following through with stuff, all these amazing things your mind can do. And then when you got your physical body balanced and your mind balanced, that's when you can start working on your spirit, because then the pathway is open, right? The chakras are aligned. And you actually have this ability to go much deeper in your connection with spirit, with the infinite, with the divine, which was there the whole time. You just didn't observe it until you take drugs, plant medicine, and go deep into that experience, right? But when you create that proper foundation, you can get closer and closer to it. And an interesting thing is what happens is these memories from taking the medicine allow you to create those same states of frequency in your being without having to take it. So that's a whole concept.
Sounds beautiful. So what made you get into one-on-one coaching?
I realized I've been coaching people all my life, since I'm a teenager or young adult, always, I had these conversations with people, and it was always something that fulfilled me. And so even while I was in India, I did a lot of coaching without calling it coaching. And then when I left from there and I was kind of, coming out of my cave back into the normal world, I was looking around and I was saying like, oh, what would really fill my heart? And what would I love to do all day long, even if no one would pay me money? And coaching was the thing, right? I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I realized, oh my God, and people are willing to pay me money for this. This is even better. And so it was really no-brainer for me.
So what kind of success have you had with coaching?
Well, first of all, for myself, I had amazing success with the coaches I worked with in the process of my own coaching, because it allowed me to get a mirror being held up to me, right? Where I was able to see myself in a clearer light, and I could see my twisted thinking processes, which got in my own way, got in my own success. And one of the most powerful coaching questions I've ever been asked is, what are you going to do about it? Right? And I was like, what am I going to do about it? Oh, I can do something about this. And then, I got into action. That's actually how I ended up moving here to Mexico. That's how I, went into full-time coaching. Like, so many things changed in my life because of this very simple question. Like, we want to be in good shape physically, but you're just in your victim mentality and like, oh yeah, and I can't stop eating candy and whatever. It's okay. Then accept that you're not going to be in good shape physically. Or you really want to be in good shape physically. What are you going to do? Are you going to go exercise? Are you going to adjust your diet? Are you going to do the things that seem hard on the surface? Or are you just going to say, oh, I want to be in perfect shape, but I'm not willing to put in the work? So it's really just that simple. But then at the same time, not simple at all.
That's fair. I just did a retreat with my fiance, and I was doing the inner growth in myself, and I had a meditation there where I was meditating and I was sending this teal harmony over the world, and it felt so powerful.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, it's just, that's the power we have as human beings. we can share our energy either to the person who sits next to us, the person who sits across from us in Zoom, to the person who's listening to this podcast, or all the way around the world. I mean, that's an ability we have as human beings. Just because science can't prove it yet, that we have it, doesn't make it any less real. And, I think science has come a long way and has done amazing, discoveries, but there's still a long way ahead of it to figure out this whole spiritual aspect of our human being and our human ability.
Absolutely. And what do you find living in Mexico, or being around that culture?
Well, the Mexicans like to party, and they're very good at partying. And there's always a party somewhere. And so for me, over the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of partying and going out and having experiences with people and taking the medicine, right? Which was really not medicine. It was more like getting drugged. And yeah, it kind of came full circle. And just recently, I'm just like a month and a half ago where I said like, okay, this is getting too much. It's ridiculous. And so I went in this really, and I do things like really extreme, that's why I ended up for 20 years in India. That's why I wear a beard and a turban. So I decided I'm going to fast. And so I went in this heavy fast and just stopped everything and kind of reconnected with my authentic self and kind of stepped out of this weird experience I've been living for the last 2 years of just trying to just fit into this culture here and fit in with the lifestyle of our friends here. And, where I was just like, no, I'm just going to be the weird guy with a turban and the beard who doesn't drink and doesn't smoke. And this is so much more me than everything else.
That's fair. So when you're doing your one-on-one coaching, what is it you do with your people that are like in relationships? How can they combat spirituality with their lives now?
Oh, it's really challenging to be in a relationship for all of us, all kinds of relationships. Most challenging relationships are marriages or, committed partnerships, because, my spiritual teacher had this quote where he said, marriage is the highest form of yoga. And what he meant with that is it's so challenging and you want to run away from it and you want to give up on it and you want to say like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. This is, it's all my partner's fault. And like, if they would just change, my life would be so much better. But it's really this deep challenge, like something we talked about in the beginning, right? With around going to India. Like when you are being challenged at that deep level, that's where a lot of growth happens. That's where you really change. That's when you are in your discomfort, right? That's when you're outside of your comfort zone and you grow. And your romantic partner will certainly challenge you that way. And so over the last 2 years, I've been working a lot with people in relationships who are going through their own process and also, working a lot on my own relationship. And one of the things I realized is there's two sides to it. And so I want to give it with a little warning here. There is working on your relationship and really saying, I'm taking 100% responsibility here. I want to grow. I want to change. I want to, be a better partner, be a better version of myself. And then there's another thing where you do that while you're in a toxic relationship, where your partner really is, is not on the same track, is not growing, is not doing their piece. And so there comes a point where you're going to have to make a decision and you're going to have to either say, do I want to stay in this toxic relationship because it's convenient, because of the kids, because we've been married for 20 years, because of the family, because of blah, blah, blah? Or do I want to decide to end this relationship and say like, hey, this doesn't work for me, has nothing to do with you. You do your thing. You do you. You're happy with you. I've been doing my work for 5 years. I've been trying to make this work with who you are, but I'm making this choice now to follow a different path for my own happiness, for my own fulfillment, for my own being. And that's a tough decision to make.
So what you're saying is people need to do the internal work first before they get involved in relationships. Would relationships be a lot easier than if they did the internal work first?
I think relationships would be much, much easier if we all wait till we are 40 and then say, okay, now we've finally done our 25 years of internal work and now we're ready to be in a relationship. Things would definitely be much easier. But that's not how the creator, God, whatever you want to call it, designed us, because we were designed to be super horny with 15 and be like, oh my God, I need to have someone to be with. And the younger we are, the more horny we are. And so that draws us into these relationships. And then we are like, suddenly living with someone with 21 and trying to figure stuff out. And we're like, why is this so complicated? Like, we have no clue who we are. We're projecting everything on the other person. The other person does the same thing. There's these big fights and then there's amazing sex and then you're back together. And then it's like this up and down roller coaster. And you're trying to figure out if you're in love or if you're like, you can't live without the other person or you're over attached. And I mean, what a mess, right? So really, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation all of us have to deal with, but it definitely gets easier as you get older and you do the work and you realize what you really want.
But what are some of the challenges you face doing one-on-one coaching?
Well, one of the big challenges I faced myself with my clients first, maybe, is when people are not fully committed, right? When they say like, oh, I want to do coaching. And then it comes down to, okay, let's do some coaching. This is going to be, the investment. This is where I have to pay. And then they're like, no, I don't. And go back and forth. And then they don't want to spend the money. And that's really a sign of not being committed. And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. But I found that working with those kinds of people doesn't help them at all. Because I've done that where I'm like, oh, don't worry about the money. We'll just work together. And then 3-4 meetings into it, they just drop off and they don't show up again. And then on the other hand, I find it when people are actually committed, and they're like, oh yeah, here, I send you the payment and here's my credit card. And they really like invest in that way. Those people get more in 3-4 sessions than the other person would have gotten in 20 without having that level of commitment. And so it's kind of like a counterintuitive thing, because you would think like, oh my God, people would want a free coaching session. Like, for example, this, I've done around 100 podcasts. And one of the things I offered on every single podcast is, hey, if you want to talk to me, I'd be willing to spend an hour with you and go in deep and really explore how I can help you. And then you make a decision at the end. If you want to work with me or not, I don't care. It's free. Guess how many times people talk about it? 0. Listen, the few people who actually did a session with me were podcast hosts. But from the listeners, that must have been tens and hundreds of thousands of people, not one. And it blows my mind because it's like it's a perception of perceived value of, oh my God, if I want to work with this guy and it's free, it can't be any good.
Well, I've noticed going down my spiritual path that a lot of people think this is new age and they're kind of intimidated by it. And really, it's an old form of healing, an old form of spirituality. But because it's being announced to the world now, everybody's like, oh, this is new age. I don't want to hear about this. This is nonsense. It's all hoo-hoo. You're crazy, this and that. So I think a lot of people are still kind of opening their mind and opening their understanding to spirituality and what it really is and what we all thought it was originally. Was a lie.
Yeah, big time. And I mean, it's 2024. We've come a long way. Now imagine that 30 years ago. I mean, I was one of the, 2 people who talked about spirituality. I see that now in my daughter's class, right? She's 16. And out of that age group, at least 50% of the people are into spirituality in some shape or form. When I grew up, was 1 in 100 who was maybe interested in spirituality. So things really have changed. But I think one of the big misunderstandings people have around spirituality is that they either think it's going to have to be a religion, right? There's spirituality in there somewhere, right? You either have to be Christian or you have to be a Muslim or you have to be a Sikh or whatever. Or then there's this other thing, which is, oh, I have this free spirituality. I believe in the creator and, I dance naked in the rain or something, right? That's a woo-woo side. And interestingly enough, both people have found a way to somehow connect to the inner aspect of spirituality. Like for me, it's not really for us as human beings having a spiritual experience in this life. It's more the other way around, that we are spiritual beings coming on this planet to have a human experience. And that is so much more real. And so when we use the word spirituality, it's really relating to something which is there, which is just as real as our body, as our mind, as our ego, as our, every aspect of our being. We are part spirit and we are spiritual beings. And so I think there's a lot of fear in there because people don't understand and they don't, they haven't had experiences with it, and their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, had weird experiences in the church or whatever, in some temple. And I can share with you how it was for me when I went deep into the Sikh religion and I became very Sikhi, right? And very like, oh, you have to do things like this and you can't do this and this is bad and this is good. And I was like, oh my God, this is like exactly what I ran away from in Christianity. It's like not what I want. This is not authentically me, spiritually me. And so if you'd ask me today, even though I look like this, I wouldn't call myself a Sikh anymore because I feel it's too limiting, because it's like it puts you in a little box. Spirituality doesn't fit in a box. It's like it's encompassing for everything. I do like having a beard, and I love the yogic concept behind having a beard, and it does ton for me. And I love having long hair. I've been having long hair since I'm 12, and I love doing that too. And so the turban is super practical. I don't live like a hippie, but I actually look nicely put together because I got this turban on. So I'm like, I'm wearing a turban and a beard. I don't give a shit if people think I'm a Sikh or whatever, or Osama bin Laden or whatever shit goes on in them. And that's their story. This is me. This is part of my expression in this world. And I feel good with it. Sorry.
Oh, I'm deeply emotional myself, and I'm very compassionate about who I am now as a person, because I had to change my identity completely because I was one of those people who cared what other people thought. I was trying to fit in for all the wrong reasons. And then I stopped and thought to myself, I should be caring about what I think. I shouldn't be caring about what other people think. And my biggest quote is, fear is our strongest opponent. And fear is always going to try to fight us no matter what battle it is. And like, even in the world, like hurt people. So all the stuff that's going on in the world, we can actually not get upset about it because the people are hurting just as much as we are.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you said in fears is our strongest opponent, because it's such a great explanation, right? It's this, we all played video games, especially for us guys, like growing up, it was a big thing, right? Playing video games. And in video games, it's like you go through the different levels, and as you level up, the opponents get stronger. And if they don't get stronger, it's super boring. If you have the cheat code, it's super boring. You need that right level of opponent to battle with so that you can win that battle and you can advance and you can grow and you can get your experience points, right? And you can get your gold and you can move on to the next level. And guess what happens in the next level? The opponent's going to be stronger again. I love fears is such a strong opponent because I say like, okay, bring it on, like I want to grow. I want to be pulled in the direction of fear and of being challenged, because everything else just means I'm sitting in my comfort zone and nothing happens.
Yeah. And then there's no growth, right? And then you're just kind of, what's the word? Like just living life and not really living life. You're just kind of coasting through life.
You're just sitting by the side of the road, smoking some weed, but drinking some alcohol, whatever, watching some Netflix. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? There's no right or wrong here. There's no good or bad. It's just what do you want? Don't talk about how you want to be like this amazing person who shares with the world, has a lot of money, has an amazing body, has a million followers on social media, whatever it is, and then say, but I just want to sit here and not be challenged, right? I don't want to advance in my video game and fight the next opponent. Then just sit there and be okay. That's perfectly fine.
I like that. Good for people to understand. Like, what I'm trying to do with this podcast is trying to open people's minds and broaden their horizon so they understand that they don't have to feel pain, and there's problem solving ways that we can help ourselves through spirituality, through yoga, through meditation. But we've got such a stigma on everything now, especially with what's going on in the world, and everyone's just so divided. But really, at the same time, we're all equal. We all come from the same source. We're all built from energy. And that was another thing I learned on the retreat that I was on. Is I met two complete strangers, and at the end of it, they were like family to me, and it was a wonderful experience.
That's who we are as human beings. We are designed to connect and to relate and to not care what the color of our skin is, or if we're male or female, or what our sexual orientation is, or what our age is, or blah, blah, all that. We're designed to connect on that soul level. But in order to do that, you need to connect with your spirit first. And that's where we use tools like yoga and meditation and breath work and all those things, because it allows you to connect deeper with yourself, and then connecting with other human beings is possible too. And so, like one of the things which is happening in the world, and, unfortunately a lot in the more developed countries, is this disconnect, right? This separation, this, oh, we're all different from each other. Oh, you believe in that political party and wants that guy to be president, and I want this person to be president. So obviously, I'm better and you're worse. And I mean, all this bullshit of disconnection is not who we are as human beings. We are designed to connect and to have intimate connection and feel like family with everybody.
Definitely. And that's the way it should be. And I'm happy to see that the children are going to be the role models, because the children in our lives, they're going to be our leaders. Whether we
or if we don't fuck them up in the process.
Yeah,
we're working hard on fucking up this generation.
Absolutely.
As we have fucked up all previous generations. And it's pretty sad. But you're right. The key is really to listen to the children, because they still, have their heads on straight.
Yeah. So what is some advice you can offer my audience for broadening their horizon and opening their spirituality?
Well, listen to the children. I mean, got amazing wisdom. There's children everywhere, all around. Like, talk to them. Like, ask them about stuff. Ask them about love. Ask them about the universe. Ask them about the creator. And ask them about what they think, how this whole thing works. Like, they'll give you some real cool answers. And if you don't have kids around, then sit yourself down and meditate and close your eyes and do some breathing, long and deep, in and out, super simple, and connect with your inner child and connect with your authentic self. Because, back to that, when you were young and not fucked up yet, you're doing much better.
That's true. Well, this has been a wonderful interview, Amrit, and I'm so thankful and grateful to have met you. And I hope we continue this friendship for a long time.
Of course, yeah. Nice talking to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.